Hey guys, so I wanted to post this video kind of going over what happened at Extreme Rules, how I felt about the matches, and what things could possibly be coming up because of those finishes and how those things turned out. So to start with, we had Carmella versus Liv Morgan, which I thought was a very solid match. Um, with the outcome of Liv Morgan defeating Carmella, I really feel like Liv should be put now into that category of possibly fairly soon challenging for the women's championship. Now, that is going to be up in the air as far as who she would face because we do have the draft coming up. So we don't really know at this point whether Liv is going to end up on SmackDown or Raw. But she certainly has potentially positioned herself in a spot where she should be in that conversation for the women's title. I don't feel like this necessarily did any harm to Carmella. Um, she still has that heel heat that is positioning her as a decent heel. I don't really know if this is the end of that feud or not. We will have to see what ends up happening. So then, because of some backstage things that happened, they ended up putting on a six-man tag match. We saw the New Day, including Kofi, Xavier, and Big E, against Bobby Lashley, AJ Styles, and Omos. Now, the New Day has always, of course, been very solid together. They communicate very well with each other. They're just very much in sync with one another. Now, Bobby Lashley, Styles, and Omos have not necessarily worked together. Styles and Omos have, and they do fairly well together, but they've not worked with Bobby Lashley. And that's where the communication, I think, fell apart on their end. And there was some issues between Bobby and AJ Styles that ended up costing them this match. Now, I don't know that this does anything for necessarily the tag division so much, but it positioned the New Day in a good light. It gave them some more of that baby face momentum, and it did not hurt Bobby or Styles and Omos. I think Styles and Omos are still sitting pretty good in the tag team division. I really wasn't sure who I felt would end up taking the titles off of them. I didn't necessarily see Randy and Riddle taking them off them, but it was the right call. So that was a decent match. It added some things to the story. I don't know if we'll get more storyline between Bobby and AJ. Now that we have had Monday Night Raw since then, I don't know that there's any issues necessarily between Bobby and AJ, but it didn't hurt anybody. It was a decent match. It really was. Excuse me. So then we had the SmackDown Tag Team titles on the line. The Usos defended against the Street Profits. They did end up retaining over them. There was a clean finish. All around, it was a very solid match. I don't know with this if this means at all that there could be another potential chance for the Street Profits. I don't know that it hurt them. I don't know that it necessarily put them down the line at all further in the tag division. They have always been very solid, and a lot of people have always been behind them. I will say this. I am mildly curious what they could potentially do with the Street Profits as a heel team. We have not necessarily seen them as heels, so that could be interesting. And down the line, it could be something that they end up doing with them. We will see. But it was a very solid match. There wasn't necessarily anything that hinted at where things would go necessarily for them down the line. Moving on from this. So the next match was interesting. We had the Raw Women's Championship. Charlotte defended against Alexa Bliss. I was very intrigued by this match. I've always thought that Alexa was a very solid competitor. I've always definitely liked her, and I felt she has a lot to offer, as well as Charlotte. So I thought that these two in the ring would do very well, and they did. They put on a very solid match. You definitely saw them give their all and kind of pull out all of the stops. At the end of the day, Charlotte still walked away retaining her title. But the interesting part came with afterwards, Charlotte grabbed Lily and literally pulled the stuffing out of her and pulled Lily completely apart. This really kind of broke Alexa, so to speak. She ended up coming back into the ring trying to gather all of the pieces of Lily. And you get the impression that this maybe means the end of this rendition of Alexa Bliss. And this maybe was what was needed in order to bring back that old Alexa Bliss, which is what Charlotte had said she wanted. I don't necessarily see this being the end of the feud. Potentially. It's really hard to say because, once again, we have the draft coming up. So I feel like there is going to be a break for Alexa and that she's not going to be back necessarily right away. They're going to maybe figure out exactly what they want to do bringing her back. I don't believe it's going to be the same. I feel like we're going to see more of the old Alexa Bliss. Whether that will be on Raw or SmackDown, it's really hard to say because of the draft. But she's a very solid competitor, and whatever brand she goes to is going to be very fortunate to have her. Okay, then we had the United States Championship match. Damian Priest defending against Sheamus and Jeff Hardy. So this is an up-and-coming superstar. I absolutely love Damian Priest. I really do. He has a lot to offer. He's got a lot of potential in his career. He really does. And I do see him eventually being a world champion, whether that be WWE champion or Universal champion down the line. I see that in his future. He's figured out his persona and his character, and he's definitely getting over with the fans. And I believe you could still turn him heel at some point if you wanted, and he could figure that out very well at the same time and get himself over as a heel. And going over Jeff Hardy and Sheamus, who are two, they're experts in this business. They've been doing it for a long time. And so I think that helped to propel Damian into even more momentum going forward. I really like the fact that there was respect shown at the end there between Jeff Hardy and Damian Priest. I did not hate the fact that it ended up in a roll-up for Sheamus. I think it worked for his character to basically get out of the ring, show his disgust for the end of it and how he felt it turned out, and walking away. I felt like it was the right thing to do the next night to give Damian Priest that match, defending against Sheamus again in a one-on-one scenario. And we'll talk a little bit about that match later when I actually talk about Raw, which I'm going to do in a separate video there. But I think it did a lot for Damian in propelling him forward. Then we had the SmackDown Women's Championship. Becky Lynch defending against Bianca Belair. This was a very solid match. I felt like they tried to pull out all of the stops. There were several times that I thought that it was over. It showed the strengths of both of these women a lot. So the ending was, I think, people differed on their opinions of the ending. It was a disqualification. There's a lot of things up in the air with it. So it was a disqualification because Sasha Banks made her turn and attacked Bianca Belair. So Belair technically won the match, but Becky retained her title. But this leaves the question of why did Sasha do this? Now, she did end up attacking Becky as well, which begs that question of whether Sasha did not necessarily feel threatened by Becky and feels like Becky would be the easier opponent to potentially try to beat for that title. And so she wanted to make sure that the title did not go to Bianca, and she was worried that Bianca may have been close to picking up that win, which makes you wonder, does she feel threatened by Bianca as though she doesn't know if she could beat her? All of this, of course, still up in the air once again because of the draft, and we don't know where Sasha's going to end up, where Becky's going to end up, where Bianca's going to end up. All of those questions are going to be answered after Raw next week because they should do a two episode draft. So the first part will be this Friday on SmackDown, and then the second half should be on Raw the next week. So after that, we'll kind of see where those cards lay. Really, any of them could end up anywhere. Charlotte being the Raw Women's Champion, Becky being the SmackDown Women's Champion, honestly means nothing. They could flip brands, leaving Charlotte as potentially the SmackDown Women's Champion and Becky as the Raw Women's Champion. Anything could really happen there. So that was still a decent match. I did not mind it being a disqualification because it did bring Sasha back, and it did raise those questions as to why would she do that. Okay, so the last match, an interesting ending. So we have Roman Reigns versus the Demon Finn Balor in the only Extreme Rules match on the pay-per-view. I love the fact that they were bringing the Demon back. I really enjoyed that during this match, which was a very solid match all around and really showed what these two men could do. I felt like they had a lot of chemistry in the ring, working together. I enjoyed where the Demon was laid out outside of the ring and looked like he was completely out, and at any moment Roman could go out and get him, bring him into the ring, and win. But they added that touch of the red lights flashing, signaling the Demon, and I thought it was very well done by Finn with as the beats were coming, he had those motions of him essentially being kind of resuscitated and being brought back from virtually unresponsive there on the floor. I really thought that Finn was going to win. I think a lot of people did. And then when he was going for the coup de grace, the ring collapsed. The ropes what he was standing on to perform the coup de grace collapsed, which helped Roman to be able to get out of the way and not take the coup de grace, which allowed Roman to pick up the win. I don't believe that this was an accident. I think people are accurate when they're saying that this was planned, and I don't know if this means that there's more to come for Roman and the Demon. That is, as well as everything else, up in the air because we don't know where Roman's going to end. Again, we don't know where Finn is going to end up. So they may end up on the same brand. They might not, which means there's nothing more for the storyline. With the draft and technically not the next pay-per-view because technically the next pay-per-view is the one in Saudi Arabia. But the next U.S. pay-per-view being Survivor Series, which does tend to go across brands. Typically, though, the titles are not necessarily on the line, but the champions do typically still go up against the opposing champion from the other brand. So I don't know if we'll see anything between Finn and Roman there. Probably not. Maybe we get more from the storyline on Friday with the draft technically starting but not necessarily in place, where the superstars will officially switch brands until the following week. You will actually start to see the shape of that draft fully become apparent, if you will. Overall, I thought the pay-per-view was very good. I enjoyed it. This was a little bit weirder in that the outcomes, you don't really know where storylines are going from it, and you can't necessarily project it. Sometimes after a pay-per-view, you can kind of tell where they're going to go with the storyline, whether they're going to continue a feud, whether they're starting a feud with someone else because maybe someone came out and caused a distraction. This is different because we have the draft and we don't know where people are going to end. But it was a very good pay-per-view. It was very well done. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that we now have Sasha Banks back in the equation. I don't think it's going to be long before she is back in the title picture. I think that will be very quickly done, if not right away. But we will see with this week's show. I will be back and we will talk about Monday Night Raw.